There is a moment that most people never notice, not because it happens too fast, but because it happens in plain sight, disguised as something ordinary, a conversation that ends earlier than expected, a decision postponed by a single day, a habit quietly dropped after 3 weeks of discipline. From the outside, none of these look like turning points. They look like noise, like the unremarkable texture of an average Tuesday. But something shifts in those moments. A route closes, another opens. And the person who walks out of that Tuesday is navigating a fundamentally different version of their own life, without any map, without any warning, and in most cases, without the faintest awareness that a bifurcation just occurred. This is what the ancient philosophers called the crossroads, not a dramatic scene with thunder and a choice between good and evil. The real crossroads is mundane, quiet, and relentless. It happens every day, in the space between what we intend and what we actually do, between the person we are performing for the world and the person we are when no one is watching, between the moment we feel the pull towards something greater and the moment we decide whether to follow it or explain it away. What if the life you are living right now is not the only version of your life that exists? What if at this very moment there are other routes branching outward from every significant decision you have ever made or failed to make, each one populated by a version of you that chose differently, acted sooner, held on longer, or let go with more grace? And what if the distance between the life you are living and the life you sense is possible for you is not a matter of luck, talent, or timing, handed down from the heavens, but a matter of something far more ancient, far more precise, and far more available than you have been led to believe? This is not a conversation about wishful thinking. It is not a conversation about visualizing outcomes or repeating affirmations until the universe delivers a package to your door. This is a conversation about the mechanics of how a life actually changes, pulled from the deepest wells of philosophical tradition, from thinkers who mapped the architecture of human transformation long before the language of self-help existed. We are going to follow the thread laid down by one of the most unsettling and rigorous minds of the 20th century, a man who taught that the vast majority of human beings are, in a very precise and technical sense, asleep. We are going to examine what the Stoics understood about the relationship between inner architecture and outer circumstance. We are going to sit with the paradox that the Taoists encoded in 2 words that have been misread for centuries. And we are going to arrive, finally, at an idea so simple and so radical that most people spend their entire lives circling it without ever landing on it. The idea is this: you are not moving through time on a single fixed track. You are at every moment selecting which version of your life materializes, and the mechanism of that selection is not mystical. It is philosophical, practical, and ruthlessly honest about what it demands from you. If these ideas resonate with you as we move through this journey, consider subscribing so we can keep hunting these mysteries together. Now, before we go any further, we need to dismantle something. We need to dismantle the story most of us inherited about what reality is and how it works, because that story, quietly and efficiently, keeps us locked in a very narrow band of possibility. The conventional picture of a human life goes something like this. You are born into a set of circumstances. Those circumstances shape your options. Your options determine your outcomes. The whole thing moves in one direction, forward, like a train on rails, and the rails were laid before you arrived. Some people get better rails than others. Some people are lucky. Most people are not particularly lucky, and the distance between where you are and where you want to be is primarily a function of external factors, things outside your jurisdiction, things you must wait for, petition for, or simply accept. This picture is not entirely wrong. Circumstances are real. Constraints are real. The world does not bend to desire alone, and any philosophy that pretends otherwise is selling something. But the picture is catastrophically incomplete, and the part it leaves out is precisely the part that determines everything. What the Stoics noticed, what Gurdjieff mapped with almost surgical precision, what the Taoist sages encoded in their most elliptical teachings, is that the external life of a human being is, in ways that are far more literal than poetic, a projection of their internal state. Not a metaphor, a mechanism. The quality of your attention, the depth of your commitments, the honesty of your self-knowledge, the courage of your decisions under pressure, these are not merely character virtues. They are the instruments by which you navigate between possible versions of your life. They are, in the most precise philosophical sense available, the controls of the craft. Marcus Aurelius, writing in the 2nd century in what amounted to a private journal never intended for public eyes, put it with the bluntness of a man who had no audience to perform for. He wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events, and that realizing this is where freedom begins. He was not writing about positive thinking. He was writing about the fundamental architecture of agency, the recognition that the inner world is the only territory over which a human being exercises genuine sovereignty, and that this sovereignty, exercised with discipline and clarity, reaches outward into the structure of lived experience in ways that nothing else can replicate. This is the premise we are building on, not as inspiration, as foundation. The philosopher's question is not whether you can change your life. The philosopher's question is whether you understand, at a level of genuine precision, what changing a life actually requires, what it costs, where it breaks down, and why most sincere efforts at transformation dissolve before they ever reach the threshold of real change. That question is where this journey begins. Let us begin with the most fundamental unit of change available to a human being. Not a habit, not a goal, not a vision board pinned above a desk. The most fundamental unit of change is a decision, and most people have never made one in the full philosophical sense of the word. We use the word constantly. We decide what to eat, what to watch, what to say in a difficult conversation. But these are preferences, reactions, negotiations with comfort. A genuine decision in the sense that the Stoics meant when they spoke of the will is something categorically different. It is the moment when a person draws a line in the interior landscape of their life and says clearly and without negotiation that everything on this side of the line belongs to who I was, and everything on the other side belongs to who I am becoming. It is an act of severance, and severance by definition is irreversible. The word decision itself carries this weight. It comes from the Latin decidere, to cut off, the same root that gives us incision, excision, the vocabulary of surgery. A real decision cuts away a version of yourself. It amputates a root. And this is precisely why most people avoid making them. We prefer the language of intentions and goals and commitments because these words contain an implicit escape clause. They allow us to remain psychologically on both sides of the line at once. The Stoics were ruthless about this. Epictetus, who was born a slave and died one of the most influential philosophers in the ancient world, taught that the first discipline of a serious person is the discipline of desire, the rigorous daily practice of distinguishing between what is within our power and what is not. But what he was really teaching, beneath the taxonomy, was this: that a life changes the moment a person stops negotiating with themselves about what they are willing to do. The negotiation is the prison. The decision, the real one, the one that cuts, is the first key. Think about a decision you have been approaching for months, perhaps years, orbiting it, examining it from different angles, collecting reasons for and against, waiting for more certainty before you commit. Notice what that orbit costs you, not just in time, although the time is real. Notice what it costs you in energy, in the subtle but continuous drain of a question left open that should have been answered. Notice how the person who is still deciding is, in a very concrete sense, inhabiting a different and lesser version of their own life than the person who has decided, even if the decision itself has not yet produced visible results. This is the first mechanism of timeline navigation, the decision as cosmological act. Not cosmological in the sense of dramatic or grandiose, but cosmological in the sense that a genuine decision reorganizes the structure of your personal reality. It closes certain futures definitively and opens others that were inaccessible while you remained undecided. The Stoics called this alignment with the Logos, the rational principle that structures the cosmos. When your inner will aligns with clarity and commitment, you cease to work against the grain of your own potential. The friction decreases, not because the world becomes easier, but because you stop spending half your force fighting yourself. So the practice here is both simple and demanding. Take the decision you have been orbiting. Ask yourself honestly whether you have actually made it or whether you have been rehearsing the idea of making it. And if the answer is that you have been rehearsing, consider what it would mean to cut. Not to plan the cut, not to prepare for the cut, to cut today, in this hour, with the understanding that the version of your life that opens on the other side of that severance is not accessible from where you are currently standing. Now we move to something darker and more uncomfortable, because the second mechanism requires us to confront a possibility that most people find genuinely disturbing when they sit with it long enough. The possibility that most of what we call living is not, in any meaningful sense, chosen. George Ivanovich Gurdjieff was a Greek-Armenian philosopher and teacher who spent decades in the early 20th century delivering ideas that were, by any measure, among the most unsettling ever offered to a Western audience. He was not interested in comfort. He was interested in precision. And the most precise thing he ever said, the idea that anchors everything else in his system, was this: the ordinary human being is asleep. Not metaphorically asleep in the way we might say someone is unaware or unconscious of social dynamics. Technically, functionally, mechanically asleep, dreaming that they are awake. What Gurdjieff meant by this is worth dwelling on, because it is easy to hear it as an insult and miss it entirely as a diagnosis. He observed that the vast majority of human behavior is not chosen, it is mechanical. It is the automatic execution of programs installed by habit, by cultural conditioning, by emotional patterns absorbed in childhood, by the path of least resistance that the nervous system, left to its own devices, will always prefer. We wake up and we run the program. We move through the day and we run the program. We react to circumstances and we run the program. And the program, in almost every case, produces the same results it produced yesterday. The same timeline, day after day, dressed in slightly different clothes. He called this state of mechanical existence the sleep of ordinary life, and he devoted his entire teaching to a single proposition, that waking up, genuinely waking up, is the hardest and most important work a human being can undertake. He called the practice self-remembering, a term that sounds almost gentle until you attempt it seriously. Self-remembering is the practice of maintaining, against the constant gravitational pull of mechanical habit, a quality of conscious attention to what you are actually doing, thinking, and feeling in the present moment, not as a meditative exercise performed in a cushioned room, as a practice sustained in the middle of ordinary life, in the middle of the difficult conversation, in the middle of the moment when every automated response in your nervous system is screaming its familiar instruction. The application to the navigation of timelines is direct. If you are running on the mechanical program, you are not selecting a timeline. The program is selecting it for you. And the program, by its nature, will select the most familiar option available, which is almost always a variation of the timeline you already inhabit. The jump to a different version of your life requires, as its absolute prerequisite, the interruption of the mechanical program. It requires the moment of self-remembering, the moment when you catch yourself about to execute the automated response and choose, consciously, something different. This is not easy. Gurdjieff was explicit that it is not easy. He said that a person who genuinely attempts self-remembering for the first time discovers, to their horror, that they cannot maintain it for more than a few seconds before the machine reasserts itself. The practice is the repeated, patient, non-dramatic return to conscious attention, not the achievement of some permanent state of enlightenment. The return, the return, the return, 1,000 times a day if necessary. And each return is, in the philosophical sense we established earlier, a small decision, a small act of severance from the mechanical, a small navigation. So the practice here is this: choose one recurring moment in your daily life, a moment when you know, from experience, that the mechanical program runs strongest. Perhaps it is the first hour of the morning, when the mind defaults immediately to anxiety or distraction. Perhaps it is the moment of conflict in a relationship, when the automated defensive response fires before any conscious thought has formed. Choose that moment, and practice arriving in it awake. Not perfectly, not permanently, just awake enough to notice that a choice is available that the machine would not make. The third mechanism is where Gurdjieff becomes most precise and most philosophically urgent, and it is the mechanism that explains something most people have felt but never been able to name. It is the mechanism that explains why sincere, disciplined, genuinely motivated efforts at change so often dissolve at a specific point, not at the beginning when motivation is high, and not at the end when results are visible, but somewhere in the difficult middle, when the initial energy has been spent and the results have not yet arrived. Gurdjieff called this the law of octaves, and it is one of the most practically useful ideas in the entire history of philosophical thought. The law of octaves observes that all processes in nature, and by extension all processes in human life, move not in smooth, continuous progressions, but in a structure analogous to a musical scale. They advance through a sequence of intervals, and at specific points in that sequence there are gaps, moments where the natural momentum of the process falters, where the energy that has been driving the progression loses its coherence, and where, if no new force is introduced, the process will either stall completely or, more often, quietly deviate from its original direction and begin moving towards something else entirely, something that looks superficially like the original intention, but is, subtly and then increasingly, different. Think about this in the context of your own experience. You have decided to change something significant in your life, a career, a relationship dynamic, a deep-seated habit that has cost you years. In the first weeks, the energy is real. The decision has momentum. You are moving, and the movement feels like evidence that the destination is approaching. Then, at some point that you cannot always predict but that arrives with the reliability of a law, something shifts. The energy becomes harder to sustain. The initial clarity fogs. The obstacles, which were present from the beginning, suddenly feel qualitatively heavier, and the old patterns, the ones you decided to leave behind, begin to reassert themselves with a persistence that feels almost personal, almost as though the universe is testing your sincerity. This is not failure. This is the interval. This is the gap in the octave where the law says the process requires a shock, an intentional injection of new energy from a source outside the momentum already established, to maintain its direction and continue its ascent. Without that shock delivered at the right moment and with the right quality, the process does not stop. It deflects. It curves back toward the familiar. And the person who was navigating toward a different timeline finds themselves months later, wondering how they ended up back where they started, despite everything they did. The practical implication of this law is one of the most important pieces of philosophical intelligence available to anyone attempting genuine change. The intervals are predictable. They are not random obstacles placed by an indifferent universe. They are structural features of the process itself, as reliable as the gap between the fourth and fifth notes of a scale, and because they are predictable, they can be prepared for. The shock that is needed at the interval does not have to arrive from outside. It can be prepared, cultivated and delivered intentionally by the person navigating the process, provided they understand that the interval is coming and that their task at that moment is not to push harder in the same way they have been pushing, but to introduce something genuinely new, a new perspective, a new commitment entered from a deeper level than the original one. A mentor, a teacher, a community, an encounter with an idea powerful enough to reignite the original direction with fresh force. The practice here is diagnostic before it is prescriptive. Look at the process of change you are currently engaged in. Locate yourself honestly within the octave. Are you still in the initial momentum? Are you approaching an interval? Have you already passed through one and found yourself, almost without noticing, on a slightly different trajectory than the one you intended? The mere act of asking the question with Gurdjieff's map in hand changes the quality of your navigation. You are no longer surprised by the deflection. You are watching for it, and a person who is watching for the interval is a person who can prepare the shock. The fourth mechanism lives in one of the most misunderstood teachings in the entire philosophical tradition. It comes from the Taoists, and it has been translated, summarized, and popularized in a way that has, with the best of intentions, produced almost the opposite of what it was designed to teach. The concept is Wu Wei, and it is almost universally rendered in Western contexts as non-action, effortless action, going with the flow. This rendering is not wrong, exactly, but it is incomplete in a way that makes it dangerous, because it has become a philosophical permission slip for a very particular kind of avoidance. The Tao Te Ching, attributed to Laozi and written somewhere in the 6th century before the Common Era, does indeed teach that the highest form of action is action that does not strain against the nature of things. The image offered is water, which does not force its way around an obstacle but finds the path of least resistance, and in doing so, over time, carves canyons through stone. This is genuinely profound, but the water does not stop. The water does not wait at the base of the mountain for the mountain to move. The water moves always with absolute constancy, following the gradient of its nature, never confusing patience with stillness. The misreading of Wu Wei that has infected contemporary spiritual culture is the idea that effort itself is a sign of misalignment, that if something is truly meant for you, it will come easily, and that the presence of difficulty or resistance is evidence that you are on the wrong path. This is not Taoist philosophy. This is Taoist aesthetics grafted onto a fundamentally passive orientation toward life, and it produces, in practice, a beautiful excuse for never fully committing to anything. Joseph Campbell understood this. His mapping of the monomyth, the hero's journey that underlies every significant story the human race has ever told itself, is not a story about a hero who waits for the adventure to become comfortable. It is a story about a hero who crosses a threshold into a territory that is, by definition, hostile to the person they currently are, because the person they currently are is not yet equal to the life they are moving toward. The road of trials is not a punishment. It is the mechanism by which the hero becomes capable of what the destination requires. The fourth mechanism, then, is this: constancy as the selector of timelines. Not the dramatic, explosive constancy of a single heroic effort, but the quiet, unglamorous, philosophically serious constancy of a person who has decided and continues, through the intervals, through the deflections, through the moments when the mechanical program screams that the effort is not worth it, to act in alignment with who they are becoming rather than who they have been. This is what the Stoics called living according to nature, which did not mean living easily. It meant living in alignment with the deepest, most essential version of what you are capable of being, even when, especially when, that alignment demands something the comfortable self would rather not give. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao, but the life that can be lived without cost is not the life that reaches its full dimension. Water carves canyons, but water moves, every day, without exception, without negotiation. This is the practice. Identify the daily action, the one that, if performed with genuine constancy over a sufficient period of time, would most directly navigate you toward the life you are choosing. Not the most inspiring action, not the most visible one, the most essential one. And do it. Not when you feel ready, not when conditions improve, now, tomorrow, the day after, with the understanding that constancy itself is the force that holds the timeline open. The fifth mechanism is where we introduce the element that supplements everything that has come before it, and it does so in a way that cannot be fully explained by the mechanics of decision, attention, timing, or constancy alone. It is the question of purpose, and specifically the question of what happens to the navigational capacity of a human being when that person operates from a purpose that is genuinely deep, genuinely their own, and genuinely larger than the boundaries of their personal comfort. Aldous Huxley, in his exploration of what he called the perennial philosophy, the thread of wisdom that runs beneath and through every major spiritual and philosophical tradition the human race has produced, observes something that deserves far more attention than it typically receives. He described the ordinary human mind as a reducing valve, an instrument designed not to expand our perception of reality, but to contract it, to filter the overwhelming totality of what exists into a manageable bandwidth narrow enough for a biological organism to function within. The mind, in this picture, does not show us reality. It shows us the slice of reality that is relevant to our survival and our habitual concerns. The implication he drew from this is radical. If the mind is a reducing valve, then the question of what you are oriented toward, what you genuinely care about at the deepest available level, is also the question of what you are capable of perceiving. A person oriented primarily toward security perceives a world organized around threat and safety. A person oriented toward acquisition perceives a world organized around scarcity and competition. And a person oriented toward a purpose that is genuinely larger than their personal narrative, a purpose rooted in contribution, in the expression of something they sense has been placed in them for reasons they cannot fully account for, begins to perceive a world that contains opportunities, connections and convergences that were always present but invisible to the reducing valve operating at a narrower frequency. The Orphic tradition, one of the oldest mystery schools of ancient Greece, taught that the soul descends into embodied life, carrying a specific nature, a specific set of capacities and orientations that constitute its particular contribution to the whole. The work of a life in the Orphic understanding is not to accumulate or to achieve in the conventional sense, but to remember, to recover through experience and suffering and joy the essential nature that was present before the forgetting that embodiment requires. The purpose is not invented, it is excavated. This matters for the navigation of timelines in a way that is both philosophically precise and practically verifiable. When a person is acting from genuine purpose, something changes in the quality of their relationship to the obstacles, the intervals, the deflections that the law of octaves predicts. The obstacles do not disappear, but they lose a certain quality of arbitrariness. They begin to feel less like evidence that the path is wrong and more like the specific curriculum that this particular soul, with this particular purpose, requires in order to become capable of what the purpose demands. The Orphic tradition called this the purification of the soul. Campbell called it the road of trials. Gurdjieff called it the work. But they were all pointing at the same mechanism, that a purpose deep enough to be real generates a field of gravity that reorganizes circumstances over time, drawing toward the person who carries it the exact resources, encounters, and shocks that are needed at each interval of the journey. This is not mysticism in the sense of something that bypasses effort or defies philosophical scrutiny. It is a description of how genuine orientation functions at the level of perception, decision, and sustained action. A person who knows, with the kind of knowing that lives below argument, what they are for, makes different decisions than a person who does not. They sustain constancy through different depths of difficulty. They recognize the shocks they need and go looking for them instead of waiting for them to arrive. They navigate, in other words, with a compass that most people never locate. The practice here is the most uncomfortable of all five because it requires honesty at a level that most of us actively avoid. The question is not what you want. The question is not what you think you should want, or what would be impressive to want, or what would make the people whose opinion matters to you proud. The question is what moves in you when you are alone and quiet and the performance has stopped. What is the thing that, when you are fully honest, you sense you are here to do or to become or to contribute, even if it frightens you, even if you cannot yet see how it is possible, even if everything in your current timeline argues against its feasibility? That answer, however partial and uncertain it arrives, is the deepest instrument of navigation available to you. It is not sufficient on its own. It requires the decision, the wakefulness, the understanding of intervals, and the constancy we have already mapped. But without it, all of those mechanisms are navigating without a destination, and a traveler without a destination does not find their way to a new timeline. They find their way back, reliably and efficiently, to the one they already know. We have mapped 5 mechanisms: decision as severance, wakefulness as the interruption of the mechanical, the law of octaves as the architecture of why sincere efforts deflect, constancy as the force that holds a timeline open, and purpose as the gravitational field that reorganizes what is perceivable and possible. Each of these is real, verifiable, and demanding. Each of them, applied with genuine seriousness, produces measurable shifts in the quality and direction of a life. But there is something beneath all 5 of them, something that the map has been circling without quite naming, and it is time to name it now, because without this, the 5 mechanisms remain techniques. Useful techniques, perhaps even transformative ones, but techniques nonetheless. And the difference between a technique and a genuine philosophical shift is the difference between a tool and a new pair of eyes. Here is the thing that the map has been circling. The timelines we navigate are not out there. They are not parallel universes waiting in some exotic dimension for us to quantum leap into them. The timelines are made of the same substance as the person doing the navigating. They are constituted by the quality of attention we bring to our lives, the depth of the commitments we are willing to honor, the honesty with which we see ourselves, and the courage with which we act on what we see. The timeline you want to inhabit is not a destination you travel to. It is a version of yourself you grow into. And this distinction, which sounds perhaps like a minor semantic adjustment, is actually the most radical reorientation available. Consider what this means in practice. Most approaches to personal change, whether philosophical or psychological or spiritual, operate on the implicit assumption that there is a current self and a desired future self, and that the work is to build a bridge between them. The current self, with its habits and fears and limitations, stands on one bank. The future self, with its freedom and capability and expanded life, stands on the other, and the work is the bridge. But Gurdjieff's insight, pushed to its logical conclusion, suggests something more unsettling. There is no bridge. The current self cannot cross to the future self, because the current self, defined precisely by its mechanical habits and its sleeping consciousness, is constitutionally incapable of perceiving the other bank clearly enough to navigate toward it. The mechanical self will always, at the critical interval, find a reason to turn back. It will find the reason logical. It will find the reason responsible. It will dress the retreat in the language of wisdom and self-care, and the recognition that perhaps this was not the right time after all. The only crossing that is real is the crossing in which the current self dissolves. Not dramatically, not in a single moment of revelation, but gradually, through the accumulation of genuine decisions, genuine moments of wakefulness, genuine shocks administered at genuine intervals, genuine constancy maintained through genuine cost. The self that arrives at the other bank is not the self that started the journey. And this is not a loss, this is the entire point. Heraclitus said, "You cannot step into the same river twice." But what he was pointing at, in the compressed and lightning-struck language of the pre-Socratics, was not merely that rivers change. He was pointing at the fact that you change, that the person who steps into the river the second time is already a different person than the one who stepped in the first time, whether they have noticed it or not. The question is whether the change is mechanical, driven by the random accumulation of experience and reaction, or whether it is chosen, navigated, shaped by the quality of philosophical attention you bring to the crossing. Marcus Aurelius returned to this again and again in his private journal, not because he had solved it, but because he had not. He was one of the most powerful men in the ancient world, and he wrote in private about the daily struggle to remain awake, to make genuine decisions rather than comfortable ones, to sustain the constancy that his philosophy demanded in the face of everything that the empire, the body and the mind conspired to throw at him. He was not writing from a position of achievement, he was writing from the middle of the work. And the fact that he never stopped writing, never stopped returning to the same questions with the same rigorous honesty, is itself the most powerful argument he ever made for the philosophical life. This is the implication that changes everything. If the timeline is made of the same substance as the person, then the most direct available route to a different life is not a change of circumstances, it is a change of the quality of the person. Not a performance of change, not an announcement of change, not a plan for change, but the actual metabolized, irreversible transformation of the interior architecture from which all decisions, all habits, all sustained actions emerge. The Stoics called this the cultivation of virtue, and they meant something far more rigorous and far less decorative than the word virtue tends to suggest in contemporary usage. They meant the daily, disciplined, philosophically serious practice of becoming the kind of person whose choices, made consistently over time, navigate naturally and inevitably toward a life of greater depth, freedom, and contribution. And here is where the element of purpose returns, not as a supplement, but as the final key. Because the question of what kind of person you are becoming cannot be answered in the abstract. It can only be answered in relation to what you are becoming for. The Orphic tradition understood that the soul's descent into embodied life is purposive, that it carries within it the specific nature of what it is here to contribute and experience and become. Fritjof Schuon, writing from within the perennialist tradition, argued that every genuine spiritual path beneath the enormous diversity of its outer forms converges on a single recognition that the human being is not accidentally here, that there is a relationship between the individual soul and the structure of reality that is neither arbitrary nor purely self-constructed, but participatory. We do not invent our deepest purpose, we discover it. And the discovery is itself a form of navigation, a progressive clarification of the frequency with which we move through the field of possible lives. This is the paradox that the entire journey has been building toward. You must act as though the destination depends entirely on you, on the quality of your decisions, the depth of your wakefulness, your understanding of the intervals, your constancy through the deflections, your courage in excavating the purpose that is genuinely yours. You must act as though none of it will happen without your full and deliberate participation, because it will not. And simultaneously, if you have done the work honestly enough and long enough, you will begin to notice something that cannot be fully accounted for by the mechanisms alone. Encounters that arrive at exactly the moment the interval requires a shock. Information that surfaces precisely when the next step of the journey needs its clarification. Doors that open not because you forced them, but because your navigation brought you with accumulated precision to the exact location where that door exists. The philosophical tradition has many names for this phenomenon. The Stoics called it living in accordance with the Logos. Campbell called it the road opening for the hero who has genuinely crossed the threshold. Gurdjieff pointed at it obliquely, suggesting that a person who has achieved a genuine degree of wakefulness begins to operate in a different relationship to the law of accident that governs mechanical life. Whatever name we give it, the experience is recognizable to anyone who has navigated seriously enough and long enough to encounter it. It is not magic. It is not the suspension of causality. It is what happens when the quality of your inner navigation becomes precise enough that the field of possible lives you are moving through begins to respond to the signal you are genuinely emitting, rather than the signal the mechanical program has been broadcasting on your behalf without your authorization. This is the most ancient insight available on the subject of how a human life changes. Not the most recent, not the most fashionable, not the most comfortable, the most ancient. And it is ancient because it is true in the way that only things tested against the full weight of human experience across millennia can be true. The examined life, as Socrates said, is the only life worth living. He said this knowing it would cost him his own. He said it because the alternative, the unexamined life, the mechanical life, the life lived on the program without the interruption of genuine philosophical attention, is not really a life navigated at all. It is a life happened to. The question that remains, and it is the question this entire journey was always moving toward, is this: at what point does a person decide that the work of genuine navigation is worth the cost? Not the abstract cost, measured in effort and discomfort, and the loss of familiar certainties. The specific personal cost of becoming genuinely honest about where the mechanical program has been taking you. The cost of making the real decision, the one that cuts. The cost of sustaining constancy through the interval when everything in you argues for retreat. The cost of excavating the purpose that is yours rather than performing the purpose that is expected. There is no philosophical answer to that question that will do the work for you. Every tradition we have visited today, the Stoics, Gurdjieff, the Taoists, the Orphics, the Perennialists, every single one of them arrives at the same boundary and stops, because beyond that boundary is not philosophy. Beyond it is the lived, irreversible, irreplaceable experience of a person who has decided, in the full surgical sense of the word, to navigate consciously. And that experience cannot be transmitted. It can only be entered. The timeline you sense is possible for you is not waiting passively for your arrival. It is, in the most precise sense available, calling. The question is not whether you can hear it. You already can. You have been able to hear it for longer than you are probably willing to admit. The question is whether today, in this hour, with everything the mechanical program has prepared as a reason to wait, you are willing to begin the crossing. If this journey has opened something in you, subscribe so we can keep following these threads together. And remember, what you have heard today is a map drawn from documented philosophical traditions, historical sources, and the long lineage of human inquiry into the nature of change. The interpretations, the connections, and the speculative bridges between them are offered not as final answers but as invitations to your own investigation. What do you think? The most important conversation is the one you are about to have with yourself.